but I remember she was working graduate students or undergrads. It wasn't doc students. And then later on, as a doctoral student, I then had an opportunity to participate in this same assignment with my professors because it was a part of the expectation for the courses in my doc program. So, iteration one, when I first started implementing this back in 2021, 2022, I implemented it in courses with graduate students. At the time, I was only teaching graduate students, and so it was like a natural fit for me. What happens is students select a topic of interest based on the course calendar, which I'm going to share with you in a moment to see what it looks like now in this semester. And then we would have a planning meeting. The planning meeting would take place between me and the students who signed up for a certain week. And we would do that in person, over Zoom, or sometimes on email, depending on their schedule. Students would then create and select 2 to 3 questions to pose to their peers and share ideas for student engagement. And this would all be discussed during the planning meetings, which would happen usually about a week before, or if for any reason scheduling became really tricky, it could happen up until about 2 or 3 days before. But I always wanted them to have enough time to take any feedback into consideration without feeling really stressed to implement that feedback and revise whatever they were planning. So after the planning meeting happens, we would have the students co-facilitate a discussion, and that would also include some form of assessment. So they're co-facilitating the discussion based on the reading or resources for the week, and then they're including an assessment of their peers in real time. Then we would have a debrief, and students would reflect as a group in email within a few days, or sometimes they would ask to meet in person to reflect, which was fine as well. Rarely did I ever get requests for Zoom for whatever reason. And then at the very end, I would share my own feedback. So they would have a chance to reflect first, share that with me, and then we would have a moment to go over everything together after that process. Because I started this process in 2021, 2022, there was a time when aspects of this same assignment were taught in a course that was synchronous, it was hybrid. So sometimes we would have Zoom sessions, and then other weeks we would be asynchronous. So I have implemented this in asynchronous courses, and I'm happy to talk about that later during the Q&A if anyone has questions about how that looked. And so iteration two is what I'm going to move into now. And that's what I'm doing in this current semester with undergraduates. I'm fairly new to teaching undergraduates. So this is something that I'm trying out this semester. And also because the course is fairly new to me as well. So I didn't want to just kind of try it out too quickly. So I'm trying it out this semester. We're actually having our first discussion in a few weeks. And the way it looks now is I'm having the planning meeting over email with students, or if they request a Zoom session, they are going to select questions that they're considering as a group. So very similar to what it looked like before. The main difference with this course is they have a weekly, not it's not every single week, but throughout the semester they have to log 8 different journal entries based on readings or resources. So it's actually really supportive because it's already an assignment where they have to reflect on the readings and resources. And they have a notice section where they're noticing things, a wonder section where they're posing questions and wondering. And then they have a connection section where they're trying to make connections across coursework or in different experiences. So what I'm asking them to do to not create extra work or extra pressure is to really pull from that log and start there, and then synthesize their questions as a group and then bring it to us for the discussion. So after they figure out the planning, share their questions with me in advance, I'll approve them, and then they will co-facilitate the discussion in person because this semester we're an in-person course, and then we'll have our debrief similar to what we did before. So I am going to share with you this document. It has quite a bit of information on it, but this is what my students see when they sign up for this assignment. And it is a requirement. So they're asked to add their name under the date that they want to co-facilitate. And then they will check in with their group members to figure out how the 15 to 20 minutes of facilitation will look. They're expected to consider small group interactions, whole group interactions, and also include a short activity, which would lead to an assessment. They can use paper and crayons. It can be very much whatever materials they wanted to include. It could include games, games that are oral based games, games that are actual concrete materials, anything that is connected to the topic of that week. And then they can also have an option if they wanted to bring in a little bit of technology, they can have an option of referring to a social media post. They don't actually have to show the post, but they can refer to it. They can refer to a news headline, or in some cases, if someone wants to show something, they're welcome to do that as well. I do provide different options for them. And the main point is for them to make sure it's connected to the topic and resource for the week, and then provide space for an active discussion with their peers. They know that this counts towards their final grade. It's referred to on the syllabus, and we talk about it on the first session of class. And I do try to limit the number of students for each date, and I can talk about that as well later on if anyone's interested in why or what that might look like. And I do mention that if there are too many students signed up, I will contact them so we can figure something else out. And I'm really leaving them to do that on their as a group, but I'm there as a support for them. So you don't see any names listed under what you're looking at. And this is basically my course calendar. I don't create anything so different because I want them to have access to the course calendar very early on. And I want them to see that it's really connected to what they're already doing. So what you're seeing is just a copy of my course calendar where I created the space for them to sign up. And you don't see any names on this right now, but just for full disclosure, no one has signed up for the first date, which is really interesting. I've never had that happen before, but one student did say that they wanted to see how other people engaged in the activity before signing up. What makes that tricky, however, is as I shared with my class, if we don't sign up for the first date, it throws off the entire schedule and the entire calendar. And it may mean that some students wouldn't have an opportunity to participate. So that's something we don't want to do. And this is a fairly new development for me. I've never had this happen when I've done this with graduate students before. So I'm not really sure, but it's something interesting that I'm looking at, and I'm going to just have a conversation with students about to clarify anything if it feels a little daunting. All right. So you can see that they have a topic for the week. They have different materials that they're asked to engage in. And then, of course, they can always bring in outside materials as long as it's connected as well. And a lot of times they'll actually do that in the session when they discuss and lead the discussion. So on the screen, I'm going to share with you one specific example from the past. And on the screen, it says, Bienvenidos, hoy es un buen día para un buen día. And basically that's saying, welcome, today is a good day for a good day. And the reason why I decided to share this with you is years ago, I had a student who actually ended up facilitating on their own. The course was a smaller group, and for whatever reason, they were the only one who signed up for that date. So I had a conversation with them, and I asked if they wanted me to talk to the class, to have anyone perhaps join them. I mean, the group was small, but we could have made some changes. And the students said they were actually okay working on their own, and they had some ideas already. So we did the regular process of planning and having all of those pieces come together. The student decided to begin her lesson completely in Spanish and continued speaking in Spanish, which was her home language, for the first 1 to 2 minutes of class with no English at all. The topic of that week was around supporting multilingual learners, and she wanted to demonstrate the importance of considering how, as educators, we either are or are not providing entry points for our students who are multilingual learners. She was very intentional about not using a lot of gestures at the time. She wasn't really using visuals. And these were some really specific choices that she'd made. And then she talked through afterwards why she made some of those choices. I will say that it was one of the most powerful discussions that I've seen whenever students have done this assignment. It's something that still stands out to me. And the reason for that is when she engaged in a conversation with students afterwards and asked them to make connections to the readings, I remember some of the comments were things like, I didn't feel as though you were talking to me, so I started to tune you out. And then she asked, what could I have done differently? If we were to do this over again and you were offering me suggestions, what do you think I could have done? And the students gave a lot of information and shared what they thought she could have done differently. So it was really, really powerful. And so she explained that that was all intentional because she wanted to kind of dramatize the idea of this is what it might feel like to a child who is in your class for 6 hours. And we work with really young children, so we're talking infants all the way up to 8 years old. So she really wanted to make it very clear that that's something we need to continue thinking about. And she kept making connections to the readings and resources. All right, so now I'm going to walk you through the affordances of an assignment like this. So in terms of affordances, it allows students to feel more, in my opinion, at least in what I've seen, feel like they're taking on that role of the expert more. It has led to deeper engagement with the materials because they have to know it well enough to then be able to move into a space of co-facilitating a discussion and keeping that discussion going. Whenever I say 15 to 20 minutes, they're like, really, 15 to 20 minutes? But I always remind them it goes by pretty quickly. So that's something that in the planning meetings we talk about, and I'm there as a support. Peers may become more engaged in the lesson and excited about learning. They realize that eventually it's going to be their turn. So I do remind them as a community of learners, we want to try to support each other as best as we can and remind them that soon it'll be their day. So we really try our best. And then the other thing, or one another thing, is the learning community becomes one where the interconnection between teaching and learning feels more explicit. And finally, and there are many other affordances, but I just wanted to pinpoint a few. This assignment helps prepare students for clinical experiences because it fosters collaboration, planning, assessment, and reflection, which are all really important things that they need when they're in their clinical experiences and in their careers. And finally, the learning community often feels stronger after each facilitated discussion. And as I'm wrapping up, I do want to share some of the challenges, which there are some challenges that have come up that I've continued to kind of revise and reiterate on based on those challenges. In rare instances, a student might alter the plan after it was discussed and approved. So the idea that you think they're coming in with may look a little different from what was approved. So that can be a little tricky. Important information might be overlooked or oversimplified, and that might not always be so clear during planning sessions. So that could be something that comes up that you might want to be aware of. And then misinformation may be shared inadvertently. I will say that these challenges are things that I've actually had to encounter. And so I do try to use it as teaching opportunities to explain how sometimes we need to reteach information because perhaps we missed a step or we realized in reflection that something could have been clearer, or in looking at assessment, we recognize that some of our students did not walk away with what we had hoped for during planning and looking at objectives. And so it is an opportunity to go back and do some reteaching the following time we have class. And then as I am wrapping up this last slide, okay, as I'm wrapping up, the key things to that I think I have taken away from this is having students co-facilitate discussion provides an opportunity for collaboration, a deeper understanding of the topic of the week, which builds their content knowledge, and a chance to lead a lesson, which allows them to teach. These are all really important skills that we're trying to develop and strengthen in their roles as future educators, so it feels really nicely aligned. This teaching without AI or tech approach requires collaboration and communication between the instructor and the facilitator. So there's a very active role for the instructor, and that can look different, as I mentioned, depending on how you approach it with email or in person, those options. And the learning outcomes include increased engagement, empathy, and confidence. So thank you all for listening and thank you for being here today. I'm going to stop my share.
Yay. Thank you, Tara. I love an assignment that's like deeply, deeply rooted in community. That's such a good example of teaching without tech. Thank you. Amazing. Jeff, you are up. I did love this assignment. It's so like community rooted. It's so fun.
Lovely. Thank you. I think you guys can all see my screen share now, I hope. Thanks, Gina, for the thumbs up. The title of my talk is going to be Reading Like It's 1999, which is going to detail my experiments with prohibiting devices from the classroom and requiring the use of a paper course pack. This is a funny place for me to be, and some of you know me well enough to know why. I've been teaching at Hunter for more than 20 years. I've been teaching in the Digital Humanities program at the Graduate Center for a number of years as well. I presented a lot of times in this forum on kind of the opposite, thinking about how to use digital affordances to kind of break down in some ways or question the paradigm of silent solitary reading or kind of paper-based reading. I think an awful lot in my teaching and my research about kind of the digital and textuality and humanistic traditions of learning, of reading and writing and researching. I'll just sort of frame this by saying, I spent a lot of time between 2005-ish to 2019-ish, kind of pushing the envelope, having students blog on WordPress, having students build digital objects together, having students socially read and annotate texts using platforms like Hypothesis together, doing collective bibliographies, on and on, to kind of create these really boisterous, shared social spaces of reading, writing, and researching. I still like doing that stuff. So this is not a 180-degree turn or like a binary flip. Nonetheless, several years ago, I started to realize that students were really struggling with attentional issues. Students were using AI interfaces to substitute for writing, as we all know, and we were very anxiously discussing in my department. But the epiphanic moment for me was when I realized that students were using AI to read, and that they were substituting for these really dense, detailed readings kind of, Claude based summaries, and hey Claude, give me 3 bullet points of smart things to say about Joyce's Ulysses or whatever. I this semester I wanted to really make a hard turn and see what would happen if I really radically changed the way that students were relating to text. The patron saint of this effort, of course, is Henry David Thoreau, who's on the cover. He says, our life is frittered away. Let me see if I can make are frittered away by detail. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Keep your accounts on your thumbnail. And so this kind of patron saint of living deliberately, of voluntary simplicity in the service of, I think, deep focus, makes him kind of a nice figure, inspirational figure for this kind of thing. So, how do I make it go? Oh, sorry. Okay. So the problem, as I see it, which I've already started to get into, is how do we, as humanists especially, cultivate deep reading in a hyper-reading based media ecology? And here I'm invoking the great work of N. Catherine Hales, a scholar of digital textuality, who differentiates between deep reading, which is sustained attentive engagement with dense texts, what we've kind of always done in literature, certainly, and in the humanities more broadly, contrasting that deep reading with the emergent hyper reading, which is afforded by especially the internet and kind of hyperlinked and sort of chopped up modes of reading, and the chopped up modes of attention that are kind of suited to that mode of reading. AI adds a sort of another layer on top of this in the sense that it can kind of substitute for writing and reading and kind of, form this very diabolical shortcut that kind of short circuit students reading. So you can see my images on the left-hand side. I have the Great Rose Reading Room of our New York Public Library, which is conducive to deep reading. And on the right, I think this is a TikTok kind of trend right now to chop up a bazillion things into one screen and kind of make hyperbolic the fragmented focus that a space like TikTok normally encourages. The setting for this experiment is my course this semester. So this is very much a live experiment that I'm kind of halfway through. It's the course English 306, which is a service course in our department called Introduction to Literary Theory. The course asks students to kind of survey an intellectual history of literary theory, somewhat whimsically, I'm saying from Aristotle to Zizek, although I don't actually teach those writers this time. It requires students to very, very quickly level up in the quantity and especially the quality of their reading. They read a lot of really tough, dense philosophical texts, Marx, Freud, De Saussure, and linguistics, and on and on. Students really need to, or I try to foster very wide, enthusiastic participation, as in all classes, but especially here because that's where you demonstrate to yourself and to me, the instructor, that you've kind of internalized some of this stuff as opposed to just kind of reading it without great comprehension. Even more so, I think writing, a lot of informal, spontaneous writing is important to kind of internalize these arguments, which really need a certain kind of repetition and deep focus to reveal their riches. So the solution that I've come up with is not very dramatic or innovative in a certain way, hence the 1999 joke. I am requiring students to use a paper course pack, which I'm providing them just from duplicating services. It's a nice bound textbook. You can see in the image that it's volume 1 of 2, and it's about an inch thick, so it's a ton of paper. I'm going to give them the other half after the midterm so they don't have to lug around something that's even heavier. I'll get back to the lugging in a moment. I have also introduced something new for me, which is a period of silent free writing every single day. So I've been anxious that this would be a waste of course time, but I found it very useful. Students arrive, they're given a prompt every single day in class. They write for 7 to 10 minutes. And then each student has the option of submitting that bit of free writing as a kind of quiz. And so each student has a minimum number over the course of the term that they have to submit and that I grade. So there's an incentive to kind of take it seriously. And then there's also kind of a quality control that I can see, that students are reaching a sort of minimum level of comprehension on a regular basis in the class. There's also an in-class midterm and final exam. I used to give take-home exams, but again, the AI kind of monster gobbled up that concept, and I ended up reading so much slop and wasting so much time on kind of disciplinary issues that I dispense with that completely. So how is this working? My impressions from my side are that, yeah, carrying a huge box full of paper that weighed like 50 pounds was kind of a drag. Going to duplication services was kind of a drag. Assembling the paper course pack was kind of a drag. Like all new things you do in a classroom, it takes a certain amount of time, especially that first time. I do think on the plus side, I notice better engagement, wider participation, and so I see kind of immediate results that way. Students aren't going through the like my dog ate the PDF I was supposed to bring to class today, or I forgot my computer, or I forgot this or that. They're not trying to read, for God's sake, excerpt from Marx's Capital on their cell phone, right? And trying to comment intelligently on it. And I just noticed better attention. I don't notice students sitting in the back and totally zoned out and failing the class. I think across the board, students are at least minimally engaged, kind of throughout. Of course, I didn't just rely on my own impressions in a very un-Englishy way. I got some data. I incentivized students to fill out a survey. 17 of the 23 did so, which is great. And I was really surprised by the magnitude of the response. So, just to hit the high points, I asked them how common it is in their classes for instructors to prohibit devices. As you can see, 8 of the 17 answered common to very common. Um, and then on the bottom right quadrant, I didn't organize this very well, but in the bottom right quadrant, how do you feel about this policy? And a very strong response. So, 6, 7, 13, 14, this is almost all 16 of the 17 felt kind of middling to very positive about this policy. And that surprises me. I expected to get significant pushback, and I really didn't. I also asked the same question, so upper right quadrant, how common is it for instructors to use a print course pack? And there, I found that it was less common. So the majority of instructors, at least in this impressionistic data sample, seem to deliver course readings over Brightspace via PDF, via, I don't know, potentially actual books or whatever, right? Um, But again, the feelings about the positive feelings about the course pack were even stronger than the positive feelings about the device-free policy. So 12, let's say, of the 17 students felt positive to very positive about this change or this policy. I also got some more qualitative results, and I think they were really interesting. This is just a tiny sample of all the written comments students made. One student said on the upper left, handwritten annotations help me absorb information better than reading a PDF online. And I think this is borne out by the research also that taking hand notes, underlining things by hand does seem to create a better connection with memory and a better connection with comprehension than doing so on a screen. One student said very practically, the best thing is that everything is there. So I don't have to worry about chasing multiple readings in multiple places. There's a sort of convenience and you sort of can spend your cognitive load on Freud, not on, oh my God, how do I find all these readings? Not to mention the distraction-free environment of the paper packet compared to lots of tabs on your computer. The third is the most interesting to me on the upper right-hand side. More classmates seem focused and engaged. It's nice to see others writing notes too. A number of students made similar comments, complaining that in other classes they feel distracted even if they're not using their device, that other students are distracting themselves with their devices. There's sort of like a positive and negative social contagion effect that seems to come into play in these spaces. And so when everyone is kind of forced to pay attention, it helps everyone pay attention in this kind of, virtuous circle dynamic. And again, this is the one most vivid quote, but there were numerous students who mentioned that. 15 of the 17 students, as you can see in the bottom, mentioned that there were fewer distractions and greater focus between the two of these policy changes, so the device-free and the course pack. So that's kind of it. I guess I also asked them what are the worst aspects of this policy, and was again kind of surprised or kind of gratified to see um, that they didn't see many bad aspects of these policies. 4 of the 17 could think of no negative aspects about the device-free policy. 8 of the 16, you can see in the last bullet point, could think of no complaints about using a course pack. Several students did mention that it was just kind of literally a drag, like tiring to take notes. I think they're not used to using handwriting as much and need to sort of develop the stamina in a way, and that it's slower potentially than taking notes on a computer. One student probably predictably raised concerns about, an emergency. What if I miss an important call while the phone is stowed away? Another student interestingly said, I keep everything on a digital calendar and I collate all my notes for all my classes on the computer. So when I take notes by hand, it doesn't really mesh. It doesn't really integrate very well, which is an interesting thought. Many of the students complained that it was a heavy or bulky exercise carrying around this big, thick course pack. I also think there's a little bit of like Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative at work here, where if everyone assigned a course pack and you're taking 5 classes and they all have these 2-pound course packs, there is a little bit of like an ethical problem there, even apart from the environmental impact of the printing and the paper and all this stuff. At any rate, I think that's kind of an interesting thing for me personally to keep an eye on, I guess. But, in the balance, I think the positives outweigh the negatives for me right now. The final thing I'll say a little bit whimsically comes from Rollo Lexicon, who is, to my knowledge, the only Rolodex to have its own Instagram account. It lives in 1205 Hunter West in the English department, and it opines with epigrammatic quotations from all over the place. Here it's William James, very relevantly for our purposes. The faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. No one is compos sui, which is to say, like autonomous, if he have it not. An education which would improve this faculty would be the education par excellence. So we started with 19th century American Thoreau. We'll end with 19th century American William James, the kind of grandfather of psychology. And come follow Rollo Lexicon on Instagram if you're so moved. And thank you very much for your time and attention. It's really nice to talk with everyone about this topic today.
Amazing. Thank you, Jeff. So good. I love the student survey too. So interesting. Amazing. Susan, go for it. And I have to say that Susan is the person who proposed this topic. So I'm so thankful.
Yeah. No good idea goes unpunished, huh? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. You should be able to see it in a moment. And what you're looking at should be pretty familiar. It's Hunter College. It's not Hunter College, but it sure looks like it. I'm Susan Epstein. I'm a professor in the Department of Computer Science. I've been here for a very, very long time. I refuse to count the years. But what I do want you to do is have a look at this screen. In particular, notice the cell phones. That's why I said this should look familiar to you. Maybe not in a class of 15, but some bigger classes definitely have this going on. You notice you don't have to bring your own cell phone either. You can look on with your neighbor. And really what is concerning me in this talk is the fact that it's not cell phones that are there. They're all these tiny little, what we call agents, that are doing the students' work for them. Okay, so where am I coming from with this? My research areas in computer science are problem solving, learning, and cognition for machines. But what I teach is a lot of students, and I really care that they learn to solve problems and learn. I go from one giant course once every couple of years to a bunch of small normal size classes. Computer Science 150 is a course that's required for our majors. We get the students from their first or second year. They need to take it as early as they can, and it's loaded with math. And it's there because all the courses that come after it reference this material. And the students frequently find it difficult. In my fun time, I teach AI, machine learning, deep learning, that's where all the chatbots come from, computational cognitive neuroscience, and an undergraduate seminar where we train our undergraduates to do research. And that was, Jeff, I loved what you had to say. We have to have a talk sometime. All right, so what I'm going to talk about, first of all, is what's the problem, and I'm going to cut it up into two places. COVID and remote instruction, to my way of thinking, are responsible for the fact that our students are isolated. They're isolated from their teachers, they're isolated from one another. You can tell they don't know how to make eye contact very often anymore, and they're isolated from what they're supposed to be learning. Instead, they're accustomed to extensive screen time. Data shows that this is frequently not unusual to have them spending 8 hours a day looking at a screen. As a result, the students are attached to tech and they totally rely on it. They rely on it for classes, they rely on it for assignments, for exams, they rely on it to communicate with one another. Too often what they're getting is biased or completely incorrect answers off the web. And they rely on tech for what I would term mindless distraction. And I don't want any mindless, distracted students in my class. I want them to learn. Using a device that has a screen interferes with the user's ability to process language and distracts their visual attention. It also, I had this slide before Jeff said anything, distracts other students in the vicinity. I had a student come to me and say that sitting in the auditorium in a large lecture class drove her mad because there was a student 2 rows ahead of her who spent the entire time watching either basketball games or movies. And she found this very distracting, and it was hard for her to concentrate as a result. Okay, I'm going to focus today on these two. How do I get the tech out of the class? I'm allowed to use slides, so teachers don't count. And how do you get tech out of exams? So how to discourage devices in class. I spent a long time thinking about this. For me, it is working both in a large classroom and in a small one. Before the semester begins, I warn the students that this is the way it's going to be by email. And since we all know that many of them don't read their email, the next thing I do at the beginning of the first day of class is announce something I call the learning zone. This is a device-free zone where nothing is turned on or visible. You can't have your phone upside down on the desk. You have to put it away. No laptops, no notebooks, none of that. Okay, no devices. And that zone is optional. I'm not forbidding them. I'm empowering them to make a good choice. Once I tell them about this, I also explain the motivation and the benefits. We'll get to those in a moment. And I specify the boundaries geographically in the room. Tell them where the learning zone is. Now, that class, Computer Science 150 that I mentioned before, you have to physically demarcate it because we have 7 courses like this in our department. We have 1,500 majors. We get full-time, full professors to do these classes, to run those lectures. And we wind up in the auditorium almost all the time. So you're not talking about 25, you're talking about 200 or 500. And so what I do is I say in the auditorium, I say, in the middle, in the front, and point out where that is. That's the learning zone. The rest of you can sit anywhere as long as you're within range of my voice. Other faculty who do this use bungee cords to rope off the rows to keep out students from where they don't want them to sit. In my small classes, it's really easy. I just say, if you want to use a device, you have to sit in the back. They get that. And one of the things that's fascinating to do is to watch the migration, because sitting in the learning zone is optional. I make it clear, if you're having a bad day and you need to go watch a movie in the back of the room, you're not supposed to watch a movie, but you can sit in the back with your laptop open. Here's the benefits. First of all, I do believe that giving students a measure of autonomy invests them more in the material that you're teaching. So they don't have to do this, right? I've also found that device-free classrooms encourage students to synthesize ideas. We're talking about technical material here. They have to listen, and then they got to take notes. But there is no way they're going to write down equations if they see them on the screen. There won't be any time. They get a copy of the slides after the lecture. So what they're supposed to be writing down is what they want to remember. Device-free students, in my experience, ask more questions. Even in a room with 200 students or 300 students, people will ask questions, and most of those people are in the learning zone. I also noticed that sitting there seems to encourage students to form small supportive groups. They come in earlier, they sit with each other, they talk to each other after class. Nobody talks in the middle. I'm too noisy. But there they are. And in a commuter school, to be able to make friends early in your Hunter experience is a wonderful thing. And I encourage that. I actually periodically give questions in class where I say, don't figure this out by yourself. You've got 3 minutes to work on it. Talk to somebody who's sitting next to you. That happens immediately in the learning zone and a lot less everywhere else. Device-free students also get better grades. They're not being rewarded by sitting there, but they are reaping the rewards. And I tell my students that. I have a class I'm teaching now that I taught a year ago this way, a little class, and all the people who got A+ were in the learning zone. And I went in and I said that, and gee, you'd be astonished at how people move when they hear this. It's great. Okay, I'm happy to give you more details during the question period. How to eliminate devices during exams is a big deal. So I'm dealing with students whose technical abilities working with hardware are probably much better than mine. Okay, they're not easy to deal with. They know all kinds of ways to get away with things we don't want. So because I want them to internalize this information. My first idea, I'm going to take you through how I got to where I am. My first idea was just forbid the devices, tell them no. There actually are people at Hunter who do that. They say, can't have anything. The trouble with this is that it can be discriminatory. We do have people, students, who have Bluetooth devices, and Bluetooth is what we're talking about here. Almost everything that connects to the web while it's at Hunter College is using Bluetooth. But there are Bluetooth medical devices like a blood sugar monitor or a hearing aid that students require. And this is, so I'm not going to forbid them. My second idea was to disable the devices. In other words, just fix the room so that there was no Bluetooth signal in it. I'm a techie too. I know that can be done. It turns out, however, that that's illegal in New York State. So I can't do that either. So if you were thinking of trying that, well, don't do it. The next idea was to police the classroom, which sounds reasonable. When you have hundreds and hundreds of students in a class, you also get, in our department, a tremendous amount of support. We have both undergraduate TAs and graduate students. The grad students teach the sections associated with the lecture. There's one of those every week for each student. The UTAs come, several UTAs come to each lecture and wander around helping. If people have questions and they're working on a problem, this is the way for them to get help. But these people work for me, the UTAs and the TAs. They lack authority and they shouldn't have to have it. I'm responsible for them just the way I'm responsible for my students. So what I do instead is I tell them, if you see something, come and tell me, I will handle it. And if you're wondering, yes, we have people trying to get away with this every time we give a test. Multiple people, fewer as the semesters go by, once they understand that we're not kidding. So, how do you detect the devices they use? Well, the first thing is you have to know what you're looking for. If you think you can walk around and just see whether or not somebody has a cell phone and you're done, you're not. Smartwatches don't look so smart anymore. They just look like watches, but they're running Bluetooth. Calculators aren't trivial anymore either. Many calculators are web-enabled and on Bluetooth, so you can type in a question and get an answer back from the web, looking like you're doing an arithmetic problem. I don't know if you noticed, but this guy had a little pink agent on his shoulder. This is from the first slide. Does anybody know why? No response. Okay, he's wearing smart glasses, and we caught him last semester. He was our very first smart glass student, and he won't do that again. Every time we catch anybody violating this policy, we report them to academic integrity. We're getting to be really good friends with those people, and I think they're fabulous. They are judicious and reasonable and fair and quite stern. It's an excellent combination. Okay, now this one of my undergraduate students told me about. That thing you're looking at is called a smart pen. And the manufacturer advertises it as coming with what you see slightly to the right of it here, which is a, quote, virtually invisible insert that you put in your ear, and so you can use your smart pen to scan the question on the exam, and back into your ear will come the answer from the web. And no one will be the wiser, except, once again, it's a Bluetooth device. So yeah, we can stop it. This is what I put on the screen when the students come into the room, but I'll show you that in a minute. I forewarned in earlier classes that this is going to be our policy. No devices of any kind are permitted in the room. If you have one with you, you have to turn it off and put it out of sight. There have been experiments that shows that even a cell phone that is turned off and face down distracts other students. So put it in your backpack, put it in your pocket. If you can't or choose not to disable a device, We offer to keep it safe for you. Just bring it up to the front of the room. Somebody always, at least one person always does. We don't lose them. They get them back. It works fine. We also provide Bluetooth-free testing for those with medical devices, meaning that they can come, they don't have to tell us why it is that they need Bluetooth-free environments, why they can't live in one without Bluetooth. And we'll put them in a room with a very alert proctor. Finally, now the thing is to find the violations, right? We patrol for signal. And we do that with an app that you can put on any smartphone. The one that I'm using is called Wonder Find, and it's sort of like hunting for Easter eggs. If you ever remember playing as a child a game where they told you you're getting warmer or you're getting colder as you get closer or further away, that's what this does. You get a stronger signal when you're near a device that is on. And I said that already. Okay, this is what goes up on the screen. The students have seen this at least twice before during lecture so that they know that this is what's going to happen. And if you think that we're taking tech out of the classroom and we're the first people to do this, we're not. There's a college where students voted to ban all wireless technology on campus. That happened last semester. Randolph-Macon has a no cell phone policy campus-wide. Harvard Center for Teaching and Learning is doing exactly what I've been describing. WashU and the University of Pennsylvania both have multiple no-tech classes. And NYU, our neighbor to the south, has just opened tech-free lounges with free lockers where students can put their devices so that they can go into a room and learn instead of being distracted. My take-home message: I strongly recommend, and my students actually like, designating a learning zone and detecting Bluetooth devices during exams. There are a million ways to do what I'm describing. All I'm suggesting is that you try it your way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yay. Thank you, Susan. I'm so, so glad you proposed the topic, and I'm so glad you're here. Amazing. Thank you. So we have about maybe 8 minutes for questions. Go for it if you want to unmute or if you want to raise your hand, whatever works for you.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm in the political science department at John Jay. Thank you for this very helpful. I think these are really important conversations that a lot of CUNY campuses are having. And I got some really great ideas from the presenters. It actually raised for me a really kind of question that I certainly don't have the answers to, but that I'm going to grapple with. Is like, what responsibility do we as instructors have to kind of practice what we preach? I was very interested in the fact that a lot of us, I used to assign a printed course packet, and I was like, oh, equity, equity. I don't want them to have to print it. I don't want them to have to buy it. I don't, so I just put it online, right? And so I expect them to get my readings online, but, what's the trade-off there? And also too, I did think, following, Susan, your comment, it doesn't apply to me. I'm like, wow, I'm not trying to give a class, right, without a PowerPoint presentation. And I don't think that's helpful. So I'm just really interested in that idea. And I really appreciate the presenters for kind of pulling that all together for me. I wish I had some answers. Hopefully some of you do, but it's definitely some interesting food for thought.
Well, you can't teach 300 students in a room that holds them if you want them to see something without putting it on a slide. I think that, that's where you have to start. If you have a class that size and you want them to see something. I have a colleague who uses the old-fashioned overhead projector because he likes to write by hand, and you can use that to project onto onto a large screen also.
And Namita.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this panel. It's amazing. I teach in sociology at Brooklyn College. And I have two questions for Susan and Jeff. Jeff, you talked about assigning a course packet. And just like Katie said, I used to do that all the time until the pandemic. And then Brooklyn College has been like really encouraging us to use OER. So, having everything online. I'm curious, are all your readings in the course packet, or do you use a mix? Put some online, some in the course packet. And then when you're teaching, one of the things that I transitioned to during the pandemic when we were teaching online, I do a lot of notes on the board. Like I write a lot, I used to on the board, but during the pandemic, I started writing on the computer, right? Because we were sharing screens. And now I do that even in an in-person class because it allows me to organize it better and they don't have to grapple with my handwriting. So how do you do that? Like, do you write on the board and have students take down, or do you use a laptop? So that was a question for you. And Susan, I loved the idea of the learning zones. I mostly teach classes of 25 to 35, and I could imagine doing learning zones. My question is, does it create kind of like dual citizenship in the classroom? The people who are engaged in the learning zones and the people who move out of the learning zones, like, is there a sense that they're not full citizens in the class? But I'm also curious about your reaction as the professor, because as you were talking, I was wondering, when I walk into a class and I see students who are not in the learning zone, am I going to go to a place within me like, oh, y'all are not paying attention, and so I'm not going to pay attention to you? I wonder, so I'm curious about that.
Jeff, your question was first. Why don't you go first?
Okay, I guess I'll go first. Just the simple answer is in this course, for the first time, it's all course pack. Nothing else is delivered. Nothing meaningful is delivered any other way. I'm still using Brightspace, so I'll make announcements, via email and the syllabus is online. There are different things that might be online, but all of the reading that they would ever bring to class is in that packet. I also have, been a very enthusiastic proponent of OER, and I've created classes that are, 100% OER. I think this is almost, as good as or better than. And I do make a note. I didn't really talk about the disclaimers, but since it came up in a couple of the talks, I do include a note that if you have an accessibility issue with the way I'm delivering readings, that I will absolutely accommodate you, work with the accessibility department, et cetera, et cetera. So, of course, the intent is not to be inflexible. If a student needed to use a device for accessibility reasons, I would, accommodate that individually. But having said that, I think, setting a standard and setting the tone, is worth it for me. Regarding the board, I promise you my handwriting is worse than you. I try really hard to make it not horrible, but I really value the board. More so than typing on the computer. I've done it both ways. I just find that I'm able to make more dynamic connections. It's almost like the analogy between taking computer notes and taking notes on paper. I think I'm just able to graphically represent things, use arrows and, different colors and fonts, and, there are just things that you can do on the board. It's a wonderful educational technology. It's a very supple instrument, kind of compared to, some of the limitations of typing for me. But I also can't type in front of anyone else. I immediately start like instantly. So yeah, for a few different reasons.
Okay, so I wondered about discriminating. I think that's a great question. And so, what I do in a small classroom, I'm not one of these people who can teach sitting down. I walk anyway. And I have my favorite little clicker in my hand. And so I can manipulate my slides wherever I am. And in the auditorium, even, I have been known to get down off the stage and walk up and down the aisle to make contact, as it were. I don't do that a lot because it's a lot of steps and I want to be sure I get through my material. But what I do is, because I'm having the students sit in the front and the center, is the learning zone, I make it my business to stand in front of the sides a lot. So I am looking at them, and I am sometimes even in a lecture calling on them. And that I make sure I do that. I've also tried this thing where this one works really well because there's a center, a left, and a right. I've also tried this thing where I put a problem up on the screen because it would take too long to do anything else, and then say, okay, let's see who gets it, which side of the room gets it first. And they get very competitive. It's really cute. I think, the techie kids really love anything that looks like a game. And so they'll play. So I am engaging them, but I don't know the names, sadly. In my regular classes, I learn everybody's name, but in a room with 300 students in it, I'm not going to know their names. And I try once in a while when people are giving me good answers or asking questions to ask them who they are. And I go out of my way not to just do that in the learning zone. I'm grading myself a lot because you're right, you could fall into that trap, but I try not to.
I love it. There's so much interest here. So presenters, if you can stay, thank you. Everyone else, if you have to get to other meetings, go to your other meetings. But thank you for coming to ACERT. Jack, I want to get your question.
Sure. This is actually a question, Gina, as much for you as for any of the presenters. One of like the 4 or 5 books that I'm in the middle of reading is by a writer named James Lang, who writes a lot about education. He's an instructional designer, and he has a wonderful book called "Distracted: Why Students Can't Focus and What You Can Do About It." And I've read the chapter on like establishing technology policies and other things, and this whole talk calls that to mind. And I'm wondering, is there any way that we can have like a little book club and read that together? Because I mean, to me, this conversation has been so generative. So many wonderful ideas I'm already thinking are usable, adaptable, or at least getting me think about how I might want to do that in kind of the context that I teach in. And I'm just wondering, I would love to continue that conversation. It seems like that might be a good focus point. So Gina, can we do this?
I love that. Put it in the feedback. So when you close the Zoom and you get the feedback, put it in the feedback. I know that book. So we'll do that for a summer maybe.
I just threw that in the chat so everyone has the book title.
I
So
love it. Thank you so
The
much.
other thing is, I don't know what your department meetings are like, but I periodically put my hand up in department meetings and give about 5 minutes of this with data because I now am starting to collect data. And my colleagues are starting, I just rode up in the elevator with one today who said he was doing it. He was doing it his way, whatever his way was, it doesn't matter. And he was delighted with the result. So try it out.
Well, thank you all. Bravo. Thank you, presenters. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Susan, for presenting as well as formulating this topic. You are all amazing. We're so grateful. Come join us at ACERT always. We hope you have a beautiful, beautiful
yeah, right. You were right.
Thursday.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you soon.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you
Thank
all
you.
so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Jack. I'm going to get that.
Thanks, Gina. Take care.
Bye. Thank you, presenters,
Thank
so
you,
much.
Gina.
Thank you,
Really
Susan,
fun.
so much. Thank you, Tara, so much. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Jeff, so
Gina.
much. We'll
And
see
Jeff,
you.
I want to talk to you about my undergraduate research training course, where I've been dealing with paper as opposed to screen too. Be
Oh, I
fun.
love it. Let's talk. What days are you on campus?
Monday and Wednesday always, but today's Thursday and I'm here.
Okay, I'm a Monday, Wednesday guy too, so let's do it.
Okay,
I'll
great.
reach out.
Send me mail. That's terrific. Take care. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Thank you, everyone.